implement in their classroom. So we have next up Professor Arlene Chandler. She has 20 years experience in the School of Business at Indian River State College. She is an alumnus of Indian River Community College, Barry University, and Florida Institute of Technology. She shares her experiences with creating unique and relevant real-world student engagement techniques that can be applied across disciplines. Arlene, I'm passing the cup to you. The mic is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jody. I appreciate it. And I wanted to just start out by thanking the coffee shop team for creating an environment like this where we can share and learn together. And thank you, Sharon, for some of those incredible examples that you shared. I've been through the micro-credentialing and the AQ credentialing myself, but yet hearing it from you gave me some different perspectives that I'm eager to apply in my classroom as well. So thank you for that. I'm going to jump right in then to my presentation, and Steve, if you'll move our screen, then I'm going to tell you that coffee aficionados across the world are quite familiar with the term nitro cold brew. So I've got a can of nitro cold brew here. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I wanted to share that with you. It starts out with just a regular coffee bean, and then they cold brew it. When you cold brew it, it turns up the sweetness and it turns down the acidity. And then they add in the nitro, which creates this really fascinating cascading foam effect that has coffee lovers paying $6 and more for a single cup of coffee that would have only cost a couple of bucks if you had used the traditional brewing process. So I have to start out and say, well, what does that have to do with us? This is supposed to be AQ. Well, today we're going to discover some ways that we can use the AQ teaching method to nitro cold brew our lessons and then transform them into a product that's going to excite and delight our customers. So my modality is that of working with both the live and the synchronous. I teach in every modality, but the examples I'm going to use today are really about the live and the synchronous. Steve, if we can slide that forward. Great. So who is my learner? Once you figure out what modality you're going to use, then you have to identify your learner. I teach at a satellite campus in Vero Beach, a satellite of IRSC in Fort Pierce. And it appears that the majority of my students are young females. And they come in with a lack of self-confidence. But unfortunately, that's exacerbated by the fact that they don't read the textbook. So it just perpetuates itself. But with the AQ methods, I've found that I can give them hands-on guidance in getting into some projects and doing some self-discovery that actually ends up building their self-confidence. And I'm getting about a 95% success rate with these methods, so I know for certain that they work. Let's look at that next slide to learn which of the methods I chose. Now, in every AQ module, as Sharon had also mentioned, there's a plethora of ideas that you can select. I chose the jigsaw puzzle and the pair share from this particular module, and I combined them. And the reason I chose them is because they also help me teach these other companion skills that I want my students to learn for the real world of work. And those are my C words. So we learn things like collaboration, communication, creativity, and I think the all-important one is, of course, that critical thinking method. So now that we know why we chose it, let me show you how I create student buy-in. I start out by asking them just to pick up their cell phone and go ahead and check around in there to see what kind of skills they're going to need in order to succeed in their career field, whatever that field happens to be. And generally they come up with something that looks similar to this one. This one's from the World Economic Forum, so it comes up near the front of your search list every time. But I concentrate on those top 3 to 5 items. And as you can see, we have problem solving, critical thinking skills, creativity, some communication, coordinating with others, just the right tools to help them in their world of work. So now that we've looked at their buy-in, let's look at the implementation. So I chose the Jigsaw puzzle, but I changed the name to Discovery Teams because that fits well with what I wanted to do and my personality as a teacher. And that's one of the neat things about AQ is it's so flexible. So I take each of my lessons and I divide them up into 4 learning activities, all on the same topic, but different learning approaches and learning activities. And then I set up the team activities in advance. I share my rationale, just like Sharon said, you always tell them why. Assign the teams. I put very specific time parameters on there, just like it is in the real world of business. So by 6 o'clock, we'll do this. By 6:15, we'll do this. At 7 o'clock, we're expected to have this ready. And a lot of individual accountability, because even though we're working in a team, an instructor-led team, and though we're working in a team, you're going to be individually accountable for certain things within the project. And those that say they hate group or team projects, I always make it very clear, you don't get a team grade. Each person on the team is going to get their own specific grade. And so then I serve each group as I'm working through the teams to make sure that they're on target. If I'm in the classroom, I visit their group physically. If I'm in synchronous, I jump in and out of their work groups. Let's look at that second slide on implementation. So on the other part of the implementation, I've just taken a couple of clips off of my Discovery Team document. So this is not the full document. The top of the document always gives the rationale, or maybe not the rationale. I guess we're saying we're setting the scene of saying that their company is going to present a conference. And they're going to have all these different breakout teams at the conference, and your particular department or team is responsible for presenting this particular activity. And so then you can see where the Sylvester is. That's one of the team activities that was on a sheet of 4 activities. And so on this particular Discovery Team Jigsaw puzzle, I gave them cute little team names, Sylvester, Tweety Bird, Roadrunner, but you can either have them select their own team names if you have time for that, or you can give them a movie and say they have to pick characters out of that for their team name. It just makes it a little bit more fun and certainly engaging. And so this particular team was in charge of creating a game, and that's going to be their presentation. They're going to have the other team that they present to play their game. So they can use course vocabulary, they can use the concepts of that lesson, they can use a particular article or a chapter or a module in order to get the information, and they create questions and answers with it. So here they are, they're researching the information, and then they're putting it into questions, and everybody on this group knows teaching it, learning it well enough to teach it is a lot different than just sitting on the other side of the desk and absorbing it as it comes towards you. And so you can see down in the bottom left-hand side of the screen also that I have them open up a Google Doc or a Google slide because they are required to collaborate on the team activity, and then they have to invite me to that slide or that Google Doc as well. So I can surf in and out of their Google Docs as well as I'm surfing in and out of their, their groups. So let's look at that next slide. This is a totally different Jigsaw puzzle team here. Don't confuse it with the one we've already looked at. This is a different class and a different topic and a different day. But all I did was pull out one sample team activity for you to look at. And in this case, every single team had to use a technology tool that day to share. So they're not only learning the topic that you're teaching them, they're learning those career skills, the C words, the creativity, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and any others you can think of. But now they're adding that tech tool and the item that you're trying to teach. So in this case, the students had to create a mini resource guide that someone could use if they were then going and they wanted to research further on the topic. So they have to find articles, TED Talks, YouTube videos, and then they have to review with 2 to 4 sentences. They have to review what they found before they put it on the resource guide. And then they create 4 discussion questions so that when they do their presentation to another group, that they'll have some questions to ask the group at the end, their audience. Now, I don't ever have the students present in front of the entire class. I used to do that. That takes so much time. Our classes are getting so much bigger that I have one team present to another team, and then I can have all the presentations going on in the room at the same time. Also, it's less intimidating, and I don't want them to focus on the intimidation of public speaking at this time, I want them to grab the concept. So I just have one team present to another. Let's see what we have next on the slide, Steve. Okay, so how I've implemented it, this is just a quick rundown. Well, I ended up just creating some entire templates, and some of them are very generic, and I could take it into a classroom and apply it to any topic. And then some of them are very topic specific for a particular class in a particular module. And I can connect it to their textbook, or I can just have them go out to the World Wide Web to find elements. And also, I'm hypersensitive about the diversity aspect. So in the very first activity, the very first time they're encountering a discovery team, I let them pick their own teams. And so what do? They go out and find people, look exactly like them, think just like them, dress like them, talk like them, and think just like them. So that's why in the future ones, I always assign the teams myself, because I'm hyper diligent about that diversity aspect, and I want to make sure that we're getting a rich mixture of ideas and thoughts and input to each activity. Okay, let's see what else we have. I do set them up for success in advance. I'm trying to teach them how to behave in the world of work as well. You never ask one of your employees to do something that they don't have the skills to do. So I send a document out in advance that teaches them the collaborative tools. They have to create a Google account, and they have to open up some links and look at how to create a Google slide and a Google Doc. And you can see where the top red arrow is that I give them a specific date that it has to be done by, that they have to complete this process. And then down at the bottom, I have another little red arrow to show you that you can put your own personal Weebly page on there if you have instructions there, or you can put your college's virtual tutoring lab if they help with technology tools. Okay, let's see what we have next. And so now I wrap it up with this think, pair, share activity. So they've completed their jigsaw puzzle, and they've presented to other people on a different team, and now they've got this career connection going on. It sounds almost like what Sharon was talking about earlier. I love it that all of these things are coming together. So I ask them the same question every time. All of my think, pair, shares are exactly the same. So how can you take what you learned in the class today and apply it either to your work today or your future career path? Because in my opinion, that's the critical thinking element. If they can figure out what they learned and how they're going to apply it, to me, that's the critical thinking aspect. So I let them think for a minute by themselves, then they pair up with someone else, and then they share what they learned. If they're in the classroom, I have them write it on an index card in the thinking stage, so they have something to look at when they're sharing. If they're in the synchronous class, then they can just drop it right into the chat box. Or if they're in a group, then I put them in their own rooms and let them talk. I never leave a class lesson without this piece, because this is where you determine whether or not they got it or they didn't get it. Let's look at that next slide. So what have I learned? Flexibility being the first thing. Everything that I learned in the AQ series is so flexible. I can massage it and move it around so that I can use it for any topic or integrate it into any class activity. I really love the flexibility. Student accountability is something else I heard Sharon mention as well. With these AQ activities, they're individually accountable. When there's a team activity, every person on the team has to take the final product and then drop it into their Dropbox. Somebody else is not responsible for submitting your work, not in the real work world and not in the education system. And increased understanding, when they are working together like that, first off, there's a little self-discovery, but there's then that group discovery. And you and I both know that when somebody tells you something, you don't remember it as well as if you discover it on your own. And a lot of student satisfaction. Wow, it's incredible. And I'm going to give the kudos to AQ for this. The students are recommending my class to other students, and after a while, the counselors are catching on, and they're recommending your classes to students as they come in. So those are some of the things that I've learned. Let's look at that next slide, and we'll end this with some great questions. So what I want you to do is I want you to nitro that chat box. Oh, I can't really see that nitro can we? Too bad. I want you to nitro up that chat box with some questions for both you and me, if you don't mind. So go ahead and start putting some things in there while I'm ending this. What AQ teaching methods have you used if you've already completed the AQ series? But if you've not completed the AQ series, maybe some other teaching method that you're using, and you can just put a couple of sentences in there. What's working for you? What ideas might you be taking home from this idea today? The pair share, the think, the jigsaw puzzle, discovery teams, whatever. And hey, do you want me to send you samples of the jigsaw puzzles that I've already created? Because some of them are so generic, they could fit into any topic, no matter what you're teaching. And finally, what questions do you have for me? So let's hear what's in the chat box, please.
Absolutely, it's nitroed. So let me start off with a question from Trish. Are applied learning insights shared with the whole class? And then on discussion board, etc.
Are the applied learning insights? So actually, they are if they're in the synchronous class. When they're on the cards, I collect them to determine whether or not they were getting it and whether or not I was saying it right. And I use the same with the chat box because I save all of my chat boxes from all my synchronous classes. So if they're in a synchronous class, they do get to see it, and everybody gets to see it and then can comment on it. As I said, I never leave a class without this aspect because this is where I know if they got it. So thank you for that question. I hope I answered that. What else?
You're getting a lot of takers on your offer to send samples of the jigsaw puzzles. I can understand that. Those are very impactful, but they take some pre-thinking for them to go smoothly. So we'll be sure to get samples out to our participants. Okay. We're also have a request for a copy of the slide, and I know Jody will address how to get the materials at some point later in the session. Here's another one about your topic. How does this activity affect the learning development tempo?
The learning development tempo. Let me think about that. Well, I'm still doing synchronous classes for about 2.5 hours, and my live classes, some got cut down to less time, but I'm still getting the 2.5 hour in most cases. So the learning development tempo, let's see, because I give them the agenda in the beginning that tells them when certain things are due, I think I'm mirroring the real world of business. So you have a certain amount of time to complete a project. I never give them more than they can do. So say the Sylvester team that we looked at, there are 4 students working on that together for the class. And I like a class where I just set it up with just a little hair of lecture in the beginning, just to give them the rationale and maybe a few definitions, a couple of concepts, show them something online where it's being applied in the world of work or something to get that buy-in. Then I jump right into these activities. So I do seem to always have enough time for them to complete it. In addition, if they feel like they still want to dress up some areas on their project, they can continue to work on the project outside of class before they put it in their Dropbox. So, but I think the tempo is right in the classroom, and they like to do it while I'm guiding them. So I think the tempo is good. Thank you for asking that.
Yes, and that same person followed up with just to say that he has a course of 50 minutes. So maybe the concern was about getting through the activity in the 50-minute time period.
And thank you for that, because maybe you have to shorten the activity a little bit, or maybe each team that you create is not going to create something that's as in-depth as I'm asking these students with a 2 or 2.5 hour time frame. So instead of asking them to create a game with 2 quizzes of 10 questions each, you might ask them just to go to the hangmanwords.com website and create 1 question with a 1-word answer, and then they capture that link and they can share that with the other team. So you can really reduce these down. It still requires some self-discovery, and maybe not as much learning is going to take place in that 50 minutes because we have 50-minute hours. You can't teach more than 50 minutes. But that doesn't mean that they can't work independently on some other elements. And some teachers like to give them group work even outside of the classroom. I don't like that as much, but it is a method.
Thank you. And we have a follow-up on the Hangman website. What is the Hangman website?
hangmanwords.com is really cool. Now, when you go online and you look for Hangman Word games, there's going to be a million of them on there. I like the hangmanwords.com because all you do is just open up the website and you type in any word that you want to type in, any word, and then and then it creates a link for you, and you capture that, and when you share that link with anybody else, it opens up and it looks just like the traditional hangman game. And they can guess letters, and as they guess letters, it fills them in, and either they get them right or they don't get them in. And if they don't get it right, then it puts, you know, the head on the hangman and the arms and the body, and, you know, so it's exactly like the drawing of the pencil hangman game, but it's online. It's so fun. It's really fun. If you don't want to use hangman, some of you are very familiar with Kahoots. That's also a fun game, but having the students research a topic and then create a question and an answer, it creates a more in-depth learning activity.